Okay, today I'm going to demonstrate a vacuum tube regenerative receiver that I built. And keep in mind, I'm not a professional video producer here, so go easy on the comments. This isn't meant to be professional level or anything, but I do like building electronic circuits, and I've enjoyed seeing some of the other things that people have built. So I thought I would share this. So I've been building various types of radios for quite a long time, most of my life actually. And as I was growing up, there was just a little bit of vacuum tube stuff left. I remember when I was little, we had a hi-fi that had vacuum tubes, and you'd turn it on and you'd have to wait 20 seconds for it to warm up. And we had like a clock radio that was like that as well. My parents had, you turn the clock radio on and maybe 15 or 20 seconds later it would start playing. But there were transistors when I was growing up. I remember my father had like a little pocket transistor radio. And by the time I got to high school and was doing stuff with electronics, there was transistors and integrated circuits and all that type of stuff. And that's pretty much all I ever did anything with. But I just kind of got curious a couple years back and said, oh, what's the big deal with tubes? I remember, there used to be such a thing as vacuum tubes. So I bought a couple of cheap sub-miniature tubes on eBay, and I built a little oscillator circuit with it, and I'm like, okay, that works. And I never really thought about it too much. But recently, for whatever reason, I guess because I'd done a couple of radios with transistors, like regenerative radios, and I thought, hey, it might be neat to kind of do these with tubes. So I bought a couple of tubes here. This tube is a 12AX7, and this one is a 12AU7. So I've got a pretty much classic textbook, you could call it receiver here, using these tubes. It's a regenerative receiver. I start out here, I have basically a loop stick antenna. This is just something that I wound on a ferrite core. I have a broadcast band tuning capacitor, like the 240 picofarad. I think this here is about 200 microhenries. And then I've got the two, remember these two tubes are dual tubes, they're dual triodes. So on the first one here, I use that in kind of a classic Armstrong configuration. So I've got this coil here that I wound on a ferrite stick. It's about 200 microhenries. I have a tickler coil wound on top of it, which is a few turns. And basically I have the classic Armstrong circuit here to the first half of this 12AX7 tube. I'm using the second half of this 12AX7 as just a classic textbook audio amplifier. I mean, you can see what I'm doing with these. I don't know if you can see these resistors here. I mean, this is just a standard, 1 meg resistor that's on the grid to ground. It's bypassed with a capacitor here. Same thing with the cathode resistor, that's 1K, and I bypassed that with a capacitor. Here I have a potentiometer, which I have across the tickler coil. This is a 1K pot, and I use that to short out the tickler coil to some extent so I can control the regeneration so that it doesn't go into oscillation. Then we have the second half of this 12AX7, which is a textbook audio amplifier. Again, here's the 1 meg bias resistor. Here's the 1K cathode resistor. I got an electrolytic across it. There's low voltage, just a few volts across this cathode resistor, because we're not dropping much on a 1K resistor. And that's basically the RF part of the circuit. And that's with the 12AX7, the dual triode there. And then with this 12AU7 here, first thing I do, you probably can't tell it from the layout here, but I go to this potentiometer. This is actually ahead of the first part of that tube. And it's basically just 100K between the output of that and ground. I've got capacitors on both sides of it, of course, to keep it isolated. The DC voltage is isolated. And then I take the output of that and then to the second half of this 12AU7 tube. Again, pretty much a classic textbook audio amplifier. Now, I am coupling it to the 8-ohm speaker here with this PA transformer. So if I figure this speaker is 8 ohms, and this is transforming it to like 1,000 to 1 ratio as far as resistance goes, and that's about a what is the square root of 1,000? About 30 something, I guess, turns ratio. And so that should change the impedance of this speaker from 8 ohms to roughly 8,000 ohms, which is probably a fairly good match for one of these 12AU7s. So anyway, yeah, it is basically a textbook circuit here. I'm powering it. This is a 6-volt rechargeable battery that I'm using on the filaments, basically all 4 filaments in these 2 tubes. And then I just have a bunch of, I've got like, 11 9-volt batteries in series here. These are just the cheap things that you get on Amazon. They're a little over $1 each, I guess. And these provide the high voltage that's needed for this tube, or for these tubes here. And it's only drawing a few milliamps, so these last quite a while. I guess at some point, if I continue playing around with tube circuits, I'll probably get a line power supply. Let's go ahead and hook this up. Again, this is just a standard 6-volt rechargeable battery that I'm using for the filaments. And I've got about roughly 100 volts here with these 9-volt batteries in series. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and if I connect the high voltage supply here, as I touch that, you don't hear anything in the speaker because there's no heater on there, so no current is flowing through these tubes yet. But let's go ahead and connect this. And now I will connect the heater voltages, and as this tube warms up, you should actually be able to hear something here. And let's see what we hear.
Supported it in a referendum. New Zealand's not alone having a euthanasia law. Portugal has...
Okay, now let me explain here. I do have let me turn this down a second here. All right, let me explain here. I do have an antenna here. This is an outdoor antenna that's just basically some wire that's strung up. It's only about maybe about 30 feet long. And I do have another wire, which I'm considering a ground wire here. But it's basically just a length of wire ran indoors as kind of a counterpoise for the receiver here. And this, based on the size of these coils here, is about 200 microhenries. This is anywhere from a few up to maybe 240 picofarad. This is currently set to receive the broadcast band. All right, let's see how this sounds.
Assisted dying laws include terminally ill children.
All right, now you can see this is a strong local station. It's an AM broadcast station. It's a talk show station, and you can see I'm barely turning. I'm probably only 10% of the volume turned up here. If I try to turn it up too much, it does distort. I think because I've only got about I'm measuring about 70 volts on the plate of these, and I think it's driving it beyond the 100 volts of the battery, so it distorts.
Keeping people healthy and pain-free.
So you can see that does start to distort if you turn the volume up, but I can turn it to something reasonable here.
It's going to increasingly become a social debate as more.
All right, let's see what all we can get here.
Last weekend, he no longer serves in that role. Should that be the name that we talked about in relation to Joe Burrow? Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's a little bit too much regeneration there. You can hear it start to oscillate if I get my hand close to the volume control here.
Afraid of the hardness, and I had this image some time ago of like a fist. Like when we have a fist, a fist is a sign of aggression, but it's a sign of like covering something that's painful. And the reason why we make a fist is because, say, for example, we have a wound in our hand. And I think we all realize that Jesus wants to come and pry our hands open and force us to do things. And Jesus has no interest in prying our fist open and making us acceptable.
So I'm just tuning across the AM broadcast band here, and I am located in central Ohio. And right now it's daytime, so you're just picking up the standard daytime stations that you would get locally.
What he said was this. He said, I must see her unless she...
The season, our special gift to you. Easy 95.1 FM and AM 920 WMNI. The sounds of the season, our special gift to you.
BioShield is absolutely incredible. 8 to 10 times thicker than conventional paste, but you can see how the texture...
Let me see if I can adjust and give a little bit more regeneration here. I guess that may be a bit too much. I'm not. No, I think that's a bit too much.
Here. That's the parable. Will you listen to our Lord? And the Lord said, hear what the unjust judge saith, and shall not God avenge his own elect, which cry day and night unto him, though he bear long with them? Now
we get together every Saturday on Zoom, and it was glorious. Just glorious.
That is our heart. That is our heart, is to create small groups of women coming together.
Baseball team. Maybe she'll run the graders for us. Wow. Kay Adams, well, still got time. Maybe. Still waiting on Kay to pull up and bring some graders in.
As you can see, this volume control is only up about 10%, so there's plenty of gain here. I guess if I were to use higher voltages here, I could get enough audio to really drive people out of the room, I guess. But,
in that regard, a little bit different. We're both happily married. 17 minutes after 1 o'clock, we're at the Holy Grail downtown Cincinnati.
Magazine as one of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in the country. This is the Rick Edelman Show.
2021 was another explosive year for podcasts. Podcasting has evolved at a rapid pace. Now it's time to honor this show.
People say, like, where do I start? And you don't have to scratch it yourself. Like, if this is not Eustace and, the Chronicles of Narnia, you don't have to scratch it. You're dragging it out in the heart.
And Pfizer remind you that football season is at its best when you help protect yourself.
okay, well that's pretty much it. Let me go back to a strong station.
You know you worked hard to build your wealth. You also know one must plan for the twists and turns ahead. The children growing up, empty nest realities.
All right, and I'm going to disconnect the heater here, and we'll listen to it as it fades out. I'll turn the volume up a little bit.
Partner in Edelman Financial Engines to work with you every step of the way. Whether it's personalized advice or our modeling of over 38,000 investments monthly to keep you current and focused. It also helps to know that we use a cost-effective, integrated approach to.
And that's it. Hope you enjoyed the demo.